Welcome back to the Arabella Boatyard. One thing that we've been talking a lot about recently here and trying to weigh the pros and cons of is the age-old question, do you buy it, do you build it, or do you hire someone to make it? And everyone would answer those three questions very differently, obviously, and for us, it's kind of all over the board. So making the hull, that was a no-brainer. Making the rivets and some of the other fasteners, that was a toss-up. Some we bought, some we made. We're obviously not going to make the pattern maker's vise or try to cast a wood stove. That's a little bit beyond us, and they are easy enough to procure for the most part. But there's a few things that are kind of a toss-up, one of which is the refrigerator, which we've chose to build. And another one we could kind of go either way on is the water tanks. So we could make them out of wood and fiberglass them. We could make them out of plastic and heat weld them. But stainless steel is some of the best water tank material you can have. And we could pick up a TIG welder and dive into making tanks. We've certainly done more complicated things, but we felt that that is one that it would be worthy of having a pro come in and hire out if we had to and get those water tanks made by someone who really knows what they're doing. And one, it's because I think they can do a better job. I know they can do a better job. And it's going to be a lot more efficient. And I think it's money well spent to get that done. So we did a call out for the stainless steel a little while ago, and we had a bunch of replies, and we met up with a couple folks, and we found a local chap who's willing to help us out, and I'm really excited to do that. So in this episode, we're going to meet Evan and talk about some stainless steel water tanks, and we're going to basically wrap up that refrigerator, finish all the woodwork, and get to the point where we're putting some varnish on it. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you here every Friday in the Arabella Boatyard, and can't wait to get this lady on the water and start doing some adventures. So for this, if we had a flat top and then a closest angle that fits, and then a vertical front, that would be fine. And then I think as long as we could have it so that it's bigger at that end than this end and make use of the space.
Yeah, and that you're gonna get like 40-50 gallons just in that tank, I would assume.
That would be great.
I think.
And then this one, we'll just have to make sure that it drops in between these supports.
Okay, like this can't.
Bolts
this
off.
Is in permanently.
Yeah. I mean, we can take it out and move it, but I don't think we're gonna lose a ton of tankage by being able to just drop the tank in.
Yeah.
And then we can frame this out and pad these out so that the tank's well supported. Yeah, those would be the first two tanks, and then once we know how many gallons those fit, I can decide if you about tank 3 or 4 and see what those look like. Because somewhere around 100, 120 gallons would be ideal.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, if this is 40 and that's 40, we can do one little tank under the stove and call it a day. And if this is 30 and that's 30, we'll need to do the two of them.
Sure.
So for like this one, a little baffle in the middle.
Yep.
A good inspection port, outlet at its lowest point, we'll figure out wherever that wants to be, and then that'll drain down to the pumps, and those will just be foot pumps.
So here's a top-down view of the plan as it stands for the first two water tanks. Steve might make space for another smaller one down the road for more capacity, but they will all drain to a steel or polystyrene day tank, and shut-off valves will control the distribution. The foot pumps will be all that's needed to get the water to the sinks in the head and galley.
Get another sheet here if you want, if that one doesn't fit.
Yeah, you can just transfer it over to here.
Yeah.
Find my pen.
Human clamp. Perfect. Now you can add imperfections to imperfections.
Yeah, right. Compounding imperfections.
Pete actually had a great idea of just using the hot glue gun and gluing these furring strips on that we have left over from replastic in the boathouse. So that let us make an actual 3D model.
Yeah, and that was a big help to be able to see how it would fit into the space that we measured, and we actually did realize that we could make them a little deeper, and so just a little fixing that, and it helped to have a visual representation of what you're trying to make, and it'll help me when I go to fabricate, that I can actually look at this and say, oh yeah, that's the back, this is the front.
And if we got to take this tank out, we'll take the companionway stairs out, we'll take the refrigerator out.
So yeah, what do you think, Steve? You got a bit of a gap over on that side.
I think that looks fine, because
That's
we can
fine.
always pull it inboard a little bit,
Exactly.
and that'll gain us a little
Yep.
bit more in
Yep,
height and width. I think that looks great.
yep.
Cool.
All right. That should land. Yep. So there's the frames in the boat, and the frame lands about here.
Okay.
So if you put the outlet just in this corner, we've got 2.5 inches before we hit the planking.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that we put a little nipple in there, we put the rubber hose on there,
Yep.
makes that bend,
Sure.
and that'll give us enough room. And then we're gonna want to put the 1 inch ID fill and the vent in this upper corner here.
Okay.
So one thing we didn't do was add anchor points for these, and we're gonna do that after the tanks are fabbed. So Evan's gonna take this stuff home, get the tanks made up. We'll go out and give him a hand and check out that process. We'll bring the tanks back here with a little TIG welder. We'll put these in the boat, figure out exactly where we want the tabs to be, and then we can weld the tabs on, because we wanna make sure these are anchored. You have to imagine some of these are 40 gallons of water at 7, 8 pounds a gallon. You start throwing that around, you flip the boat upside down, you don't want these coming loose. But there's already trying to get these to fit in there, and the inlets and outlets, so adding the tabs later for the anchoring them will be easier then, I think.
Yeah, and you'll be able to definitely secure it exactly where you want it, instead of having to find out after that you put a tab in the wrong place and
By a
cutting
quarter
it.
inch.
Yeah. So that's never fun.
We'll have a full video from Evan's fabrication shop soon, but it was time to turn back to another custom job and finish building the fridge.
Now comes the tricky bit, and we need to make sure that this lid here needs to get glassed, and then we need to make sure that this drops in there very nicely and snugly so that it seals it up. And by the time we trim this foam and glass it and put a couple coats of paint on it, I'm a little apprehensive of our ability to glass all of these little corners and nooks and crannies and get all of that to meet very well without having to do a lot of laying in more glass than we need and grinding it, shaping it back. So Ann and I have been talking about this, and we had dinner last night and had a beer or two, and we're like, you know what, this might work. Let's do a little experiment. So we came in here last night and grabbed some of the foam and some 2-to-1 epoxy and a razor blade and some tape and made a thing. So the question that we are attempting to answer with this test piece is it possible to make these angles very easy to glass, glass over the top of this, glass down those angles, and fill it up with epoxy and press this in? Or can we just fill this up with epoxy, press it in, and then glass? And we're trying to figure out what is the best way to do that, and would that even work? So we have to see if we can get this plug out of here.
I think an additive would have made it a little easier to. This is a little bit hard for what, and probably hard to like fair and stuff.
Experiment number 2 was done using the fairing compound, which should be easier to shape once the plug is popped out.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's the sauce. That's the pepper.
Not much.
Game of inches.
It's still only like an inch.
While experiment number 2 was curing in the varnishing room, Steve headed out to the boat to take some measurements to determine the final height of the lid so that it's as close as possible to the height of the sink. There's not much wiggle room, but it can probably come out of the fridge base that hasn't been put together yet.
And we can do this again and just fill in any of those last little voids. And we were also kind of, yeah.
So with the fairing compound definitely looking like the way to go, Steve made up a new lid that will help cut down the overall height of the fridge. By cutting the bottom layer of the lid foam to drop into the fridge interior, he'll save an inch on the top of the unit.
Be nice to be back into wood things again. I think filming dented ass foam is.
The companion way stairs are gonna be nice.
I think it's gonna be nice to
like
get back
bust
to
out
that.
some big slabs of mahogany and do some nice joinery and finish and hardware.
Yeah, that's what we came here for. So that is gonna go schmoop.
That's pretty good. And then if we hinge the back.
So we just need a little bit of a.
A little bit of
I think once you round that.
I think once we round it, we'll be fine. Yeah. That worked all right. Go sand it out and clean them up a little more. You want to do the little one first, perfect the situation, and do the big one second? Yeah, let's do that. We'll do the little one first.
Little
That's
one
fine.
first and kind of get the method down.
Yeah, and these drop in here. They don't sit all the way down because things got kind of thicker, but they sit down pretty flippin' close. And then I think by the time we clamp it down, it'll drop even maybe a little more.
You know, by the time you grind it down to where it,
yeah,
it's really going to be touching in a lot of
and
places.
the gasket's going to go. And so, yeah, I'm not worried about it.
Alright. Squish down in. And this one. What would you like me to do?
I guess you want to mix up another batch.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll start spreading this one in.
While the lid dried out inside the house, Aaron and Steve brought out the table saw and Victoria's mahogany deck boards. Along with some cherry, these will get used as the sole for the interior flooring. And this will be Steve's version of a traditional teak and holly style.
Okay, real talk. Is it enough to do the sole on the boat, or do we need to mill up more? I don't think it's going to be enough. Alright, why don't you take those over and then neaten that stack up a bunch. Like a lot.
Well, they were so heavy, what can I do?
I stole some of Grandma's Christmas baking right out of the oven. That's the only piece I was able to get. There's 3 of you here. I'm sorry. You may have to share. Don't get me on tape too much because Grandma watches it. I'll be in trouble.
Oh my goodness. Thanks, Grandpa Dave.
Now you can work harder. You got some sugar energy.
Look at this handsome dog.
This is Wilson.
Wilson!
Hey, Will.
Wilson, you're so cute.
All right, what's the over-under on this working? What are the bets?
Should we chip some out?
Maybe. Doesn't seem to be moving. Uh-oh.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. Does not want to move. Uh-oh. Oh, I got a couple little spots to fill here, but it seems to have done its job well.
One more round of the compound and sanding took care of the remaining voids and smoothed out the corners.
Time to put some paint on these. So I took the main body of the refrigerator, knocked it down with 40 grit just to get rid of the epoxy dribbles, make sure that we have a good surface for the paint to adhere to, and to get rid of any of the places where we had an edge of the fiberglass and some little pokey fiberglass fingers are sticking up. So I knocked those down, but I didn't want to remove any layers of the glass, just rough things up and get rid of the dribbles and those couple little pointy parts of where the fiberglass was. Same thing for the lid here. You'll notice that the edge of the lid is pretty ragged. That's fine. There's going to be a wood trim that's going to get glued onto that later, so no worries there. I'm going to hit it with a couple coats of the Total Boat Total Protect epoxy paint here. That'll seal this up really well, and it'll show up any of the imperfections. So the epoxy paint will actually fill in a lot of the smaller ones, and then when that's dry, we can go over it with the Total Fair, hit any spots that need to be filled up a little bit, smoothed out, quick sand, a couple more coats of paint, and by the end of the day tomorrow, these will be ready for their wood trim, which will be really nice. That's like the last stage for getting these in. Thought about it more last night, and I was thinking that I was gonna fair these out and get these painted and then add the trim. But I think I'm gonna have to do a little bit of epoxy or fairing work between the trim and these because the corners are rounded, and same thing at the lip here. So I think I'm gonna make up the trim, put the trim on, and then I'll be able to fill that out with the last little bit of epoxy fairing work when I do the rest of it, sand it, and paint it. I think that is the better order of operations. So we've got to get this hardware to work, and here's the joy of ordering things online. These are a little bigger than I envisioned them being, and these are a little smaller than I envisioned them being, but it's not a big deal. These will get mounted and hold the main lid down to the main refrigeration unit, and they've got a pin that is really easy to take out, so you'll be able to take the lid off completely to clean it or do repairs or find that thing that's buried totally in the bottom. And then these little latches will get mounted, 3 of them across the front, and they'll just hold that lid down so that that gasket maintains a tight seal. And if you want to lift up the whole lid, you'll just have to undo the 3 of these, which is no big deal. And heavens forbid the boat should end up on her side or upside down one day. These will keep this lid from flying open and letting everything in the refrigerator come out. And I don't want to put fasteners through the fiberglass because we've worked really hard to get these glassed up and painted with the epoxy paint and totally sealed so that there should be very little to no water making its way in and out and soaking that foam inside. And by putting a whole bunch of holes in it with fasteners would kind of defeat that purpose. So we're going to glue on the trim, and then we'll be able to screw these to the trim and leave this really nice thing that we've built as watertight as it possibly can be. I'm going to pull some dimensions here, and let's go see what we can find for some cherry. Might work. Definitely get it out of you. few folks have pointed out that it might have been a little more efficient to buy a refrigeration unit off the shelf. And there's some merit to that. Definitely would have saved a lot of time. And cost-wise, I don't know if you'd really save all that much money. But the nice thing with doing it this way is we can get a box that fits exactly where we want it to, which obviously you can't just go buy a unit off the shelf that is this shape and size. And another thing is we can make this tighter and more efficient than we could if we just bought off the shelf. So this unit should run the compressor less. It should be more efficient than just about anything that we would be able to buy commercially made. And one of the really big reasons for doing it ourselves is that we're going to put the guts of the refrigeration unit into this. So there's a compressor and an evaporation plate that'll get mounted around and inside this a little bit later. And since those guts are separate from this, we can replace individual components. So we can replace the compressor, but not the evaporator plate. We could take the evaporator plate and the condenser out and put in a whole new unit, and our refrigeration box would stay the same. So by making this really well and making it really tight and very insulative, we can make a unit that is a lot more efficient. It'll run the compressor a lot less, which will make the compressor last a lot longer. So over the course of the next 10 or 15 years, the time and money spent building this will get paid back dramatically in less wear and tear on the batteries and less energy that we need to generate, less wear and tear on the compressor. So I think in the long run it'll be advantageous to make it. It is kind of a pain though. I'm looking forward to being done with it. I'm really happy with how these came out. I mean, there's a little bit of a gap, which is actually what you want, because if that fit too tightly, it would be paint rubbing on paint. There's a couple more coats of paint to go in here, which will close up those tolerances a little bit more. But these fit really nice and snug. We've got a great seal with this gasket here. And then these lift out real easy. And we've got the 2 layers of gaskets that land on the 2 layers inside there. I'm very, very happy with how this came out.
That's so beautiful, honey.
I think that'll work for a refrigerator.
Yeah, I think it'll do just fine.